Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Kenny, and welcome to Clubhouse Confidential. We're the show for the thinking fan. Yes, we are, guys. And today, a Hall of Fame blockbuster. Joining us, Joe Sheehan of Sports Illustrated, Jon Heyman, MLB Network insider and a Hall of Fame voter, and Jaffe of Baseball Prospectus. All do extensive Hall of Fame analysis. Let's go through the ballot, guys. Barry Larkin, top of the ballot, 62% last year. Joe, we're all voting yes, so go ahead, do the honors.
Well, Barry Larkin was basically the best shortstop between Cal Ripken and Alex Rodriguez. Talking about a player who did everything on the field. A plus defender, he could run, he could hit for average, hit for power. Also one of the most productive base stealers in history, but he stole a lot of bases, but the high percentage is what made him valuable. Also, a couple of other markers. He was the shortstop on the world champion 90 Reds and a gold medalist for the 1984 Team USA team. He goes.
Tim Raines, 38% of the vote last year. That's it. We all vote yes. Jay, make the case.
You know, I see Tim Raines as one of the top 10 left fielders of all time, probably the second best leadoff hitter of all time behind Rickey Henderson. Had gained tremendous value on the bases because he was a high percentage base stealer. We have him at Baseball Prospectus worth over 100 runs as a base stealer. And basically, if you compare him to Tony Gwynn, who had the 300 batting averages and the 3,000 hits, Tim Raines actually was more valuable than that because of the walks and the steals. So I think he should absolutely be in.
John, it's a lot of your brethren that are voting no. You now vote yes. Tell them why.
Raines, tremendous base stealer, great leadoff hitter. I think he was a great player for 7 years, and he had a long career as well. He played for about 20 years. He wasn't as great in the years 8 through 20 or so, but he was still a good, productive player, had that very high on-base percentage, which I think is very important. And he's not Rickey Henderson. I think that I think a lot of people are saying, well, he's no Rickey Henderson, but to me that doesn't mean that much because Rickey Henderson is one of the greatest players of all time. He's still a great player in his own right.
Jack Morris, 54% of the vote last year, so he's moving up. And, John, you are the one guy on this panel, at least, that says yes.
Right.
Go ahead and make the case.
Well, I know this is the most controversial guy on there because the numbers, if you look at the numbers, the career numbers, it'll probably tell you no. But as a guy who witnessed it, this is a guy that nobody wanted to face. This is a guy who started opening day 14 times, and only, I believe, 5 or 6 pitchers in history started 14 opening days. And the other guys are like Randy Johnson, Walter Johnson, Tom Seaver, guys like that. This guy was the ace of 3 World Series winners. I understand he did not pitch well for Toronto, but they're pitching one of the greatest games ever. He had great games, great seasons, won 20 a couple of times. I know that ERA 3.90 kind of stands out to some people, and that'll hurt him in some ways. But to me, this guy is the best pitcher of the 80s and a Hall of Famer.
All right, Joe.
Well, a lot of that restates what we know about Morris. He had a tremendous reputation, hence the opening day starts, the afraid to face, the ace of all those staffs. But really talking about a guy who was an average pitcher on a team that had tremendous offense, whether it was the Darrell Evans teams of the 1984, go to the Mickey Tettleton teams of 1980. Jack Morris was a durable pitcher who got a ton of run support. His run prevention wasn't very good, and really the reputation. If you had Tommy John's case, Jim Cott's case, Luis Tion's case, and you gave him the postseason work, particularly Game 7 in '91, that guy gets over. Jack Morris is a couple levels beyond those guys. I don't have him on my ballot.
Jay?
Yeah, I agree. I think, for me, the problem with Morris, the high run average, and as Joe said, the high offensive support. We've heard this argument before that Jack Morris was somebody who pitched to the score. In fact, Joe did some great research on it several years ago at Baseball Prospectus. We've looked at it every way. There's really nothing to say that Morris was anything special. I mean, obviously the big games like the '91 World Series, they stand out. But there are just as many times when Jack Morris, was given a 5-run lead and gave it up because he was, he just couldn't hold it.
Quickly, go ahead.
I've done research too. I've talked to people who've played against him and played with him, and to them, he was a special pitcher. Certainly not an average pitcher. He was the ace of the staff, the ace over Bert Blyleven, the ace over Dan Petrie, who were very good pitchers. This guy was the #1 pitcher for a reason.
League average was 3.91 while he pitched, and he was 3.90. So maybe his reputation is just overstated for whatever reason, John.
No, I don't believe that. His ERA went up at the end, I'm sure. I do believe he pitched to the score. I know there's some research that says otherwise. I've talked to players. They tell me he was a great pitcher. I saw the games. He's not an average pitcher. He didn't win 20 games being an average pitcher. He didn't win more games than anybody else in the 80s being an average pitcher. You don't be the ace of 3 World Series winners as an what average pitcher is the ace of 3 World Series winners?
Joe Sheehan has the master's thesis on this, and we can present it to you afterwards. All right, you vote yes, we vote no. We can dig deeper on that. Edgar Martinez is a guy that we did the comps on this to see. All right, I know he didn't field. He was a DH, but we did the comparables as far as OPS plus. Who did he hit like? He hit like over a 14-year span like Joe DiMaggio and Mike Schmidt. What about Edgar Martinez, Jay?
I think he should be in. I think once you make the positional adjustments that we use in our wins above replacement player methodology, which is a heavy penalty for being a DH, he comes out to be, essentially the equivalent of the average Hall of Fame hitter. Just phenomenal period there where he was one of the best in the game, 13th all-time in on-base percentage.
All right, we're yes. You guys are no. Go ahead.
Well, he didn't have great career totals. He had 300 home runs, which is good, but not spectacular. To me, if you're a part-time player, a DH, you better have great career numbers, and he didn't. His percentages are excellent, and he is a borderline case, and I don't blame somebody for voting for him. Certainly was a very good player. He was probably the 4th best player on his team, though, and he also finished in the top 10 in MVP only twice. Now, we're all going to say, oh, let's criticize the writers. They all screwed up. He should have been. Go back and look at those years. He was only in the top 10 twice. I think that's fair. He was the 4th best player on his own team, and there were a lot more teams in the league than the Seattle Mariners.
Certainly a tremendous hitter, and as you mentioned, on a peak on rate stats, he gets there. My feeling is this: for somebody who spent 75% of their career as a bat-only player, he's got to have longevity. He's got to have some counting stats to go with that great peak and those great rate stats. 8,700 plate appearances for a bat-only player, 300 home runs, as John indicates, just not enough. Edgar Martinez falls into that area where I'm not going to go to the mat and say he absolutely shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I think he's right there on the line. I know a lot of people support his case. For me, he falls short.
All right, so we're split on that. Alan Trammell, the more I look, the more I like this guy. Jay, you've had Alan Trammell on the ballot for years. Now you're taking him off?
Yeah, we've gone to a play-by-play defensive system at Baseball Prospectus, and a lot of his case hinges on the value of that defense. And before he came in very strong. Now, not so much. He comes in a little bit below the average Hall of Fame shortstop in my view. And after years of supporting him, I've got to turn away.
Joe, what about Alan Trammell?
Alan Trammell, again, a bit like Edgar Martinez, where he's right around that line for me. And initially, I didn't have him actually in the Hall of Fame. But I went back and looked. Even though his career is effectively over at 32, 33, what he did during that peak, tremendous offensive player, good base stealer, and the defensive numbers, they do disagree. I know that BP's got a new system. But right now, it looks like Trammell's defense is what puts him over the line. Again, he's not Larkin. He's a couple of notches below that. We look at being a complete player. Trammell really did everything, also jobbed out of the MVP in '87.
Alan Trammell, John?
Agreed.
I didn't vote for him. He's very, very borderline, very close. I reserve the right to change my mind the opposite direction as Jay. I do think he was a good defender. I'm a little uncomfortable with reevaluating his defense 20 years after he played and saying now he's not a good defender. I saw the guy play. I talked to people in that era. He was considered a good defender. Is it possible that he was overrated a little bit? Maybe, but I don't believe we're going to now say 20 years later he's not a good defender.
Want to get to Jeff Bagwell. Jeff Bagwell, Joe?
Oh, absolutely. Jeff Bagwell pretty much raises the bar for Hall of Famers. He's not just getting it over the line. Talking about somebody who not only had great offensive numbers, tremendous OBP, doubles, spent a lot of his career in the Astrodome, but he brought everything else to the table. He was an excellent defender at first base, good base runner, good base stealer. He pretty much did everything you can as a player. The one thing you knock on him is maybe the longevity wasn't what you might like. He had the shoulder issues at the end of his career, but overall, he's a Hall of Famer.
Jay?
Yeah, I'm definitely pro Jeff Bagwell. I have him in my Jaws system. I have him the 5th all-time first baseman behind Lou Gehrig, Albert Pujols, Jimmy Fox, and Cap Anson. A very strong candidate.
And yet just 42% of the vote last year, first year on the ballot, for Jeff Bagwell. Why? We'll talk about this. Coming up, the controversy now involved in Hall of Fame voting. Should steroids or suspicion of performance-enhancing drugs factor into the vote? It'll be a raging debate more than ever this coming year. The class of 2013 and the future of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Next.